Thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad to have you all on our webinar today. My name is Stephanie McLaughlin, and I'm the Training and Evaluation Specialist for the Partners Resource Network. Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network for parent training and information centers. We are funded through the Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. Our Texas PTI projects are PATH, PIN, and TEAM. And I've noticed we've got several from each of those projects on, so welcome. Partners Resource Network, we strive to empower and support Texas families and individuals that are impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. So again, we want to thank you all for being here. I want to introduce Christina Henning. She is our Director of Statewide Services and helps us put all of these on. And Chelsea Rivas, who is our specialist. We're so happy to have all of you on today. And as we're going through this webinar, if you have questions that you want to ask at the end, we're going to take some time for Brad to answer some questions. You can type your questions in the Q&A box that is at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to get to those questions around 1 o'clock. We'll start answering questions. So type your questions in there. We'll be sure to get those answered. But I want to introduce our guest speaker today. We're so glad to have Brad Thompson with us. Brad Thompson is the Director of Counseling Services with the Turn Center in Amarillo, Texas, and he is also the co-founder of the HALI Project, a nonprofit organization that provides counseling and education services for families who have children with special needs. Their passion is to help couples who have children with special needs find hope, peace, and joy, even in the midst of storms that come their way. Brad has been working with families since 1989, and since 2009, he has been offering marriage weekend retreats specifically designed for couples who have children with special needs. Brad has a master's degree in counseling from West Texas A&M University, and he is a licensed professional counselor supervisor. So we're so glad to have you here, Brad, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for asking me to do this. Really, it's an honor anytime I get to do things like this. And so just know that I consider it that. And for all of you who are joining, the fact that I've been working with families since 1989 really only means one thing, and that is that I'm old. And so just take that into consideration as we move along here. Haley, our daughter, who our project is named after, turned 30 in September. And so we've been blessed throughout her life to have a great, huge team. And we were blessed to have a really good school experience in Canyon, Texas. And she's been blessed to have a really good adulthood. And I don't think it was by accident. And I don't think it was because she had these extremely great parents, but it had more to do with the fact that we had a group of people around us who loved her and shared a big dream for her and were willing to help us in the process of moving her toward it. And so those are the things that I want to share with you today. And I want you to know that I don't think it matters where your children are on the age spectrum, whether they're 30 or whether they're 3 or 4. I believe that thinking about what you want for your child in adulthood should be must-do work, because doing that work helps us when it comes to making decisions for our children, even at age 3 or 4. And you say, but I have no idea what they're going to turn out to be in adulthood. And I would say you're right. But even at very young ages, we start to see things that they're good at, things that they enjoy, and things that they're not good at, and things that they struggle with. And that helps us to narrow the search, right? And so beginning to do that early, initially, especially just understanding and believing that every child has great purpose, that my belief as a human being and as a Christian is that God was not having a bad day the day that Haley Thompson was born. And because of that, she has a great purpose. And it's my job as her dad and Karen's as her mom to help just create an environment and to enlist people who would share our vision for her to create the best life possible, where she gets to use those gifts and those talents and those abilities to be able to make the world around her a better place. And so I don't want to get too far into this before I share with you. I believe there are 4 really important rules of this game that we're going to play in parenting kids with special needs. And one I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about. But first, I think we as families, we have to nurture a sense of humor. I can tell a lot about parents by whether or not they laugh. And if you're struggling to laugh in your situation, it tells me that there's work to be done in the emotional process to get to a place of acceptance where we can advocate in a healthy way for our kiddos. Second, we have to take care of ourselves. We tell families all the time, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And so with Haley at 30, she's halfway through her race, which means we still have a long way to go in helping her get to the end of her race. The third one is the need for parents to educate themselves so that we are healthy and effective advocates. That there's a lot of unhealthy advocacy training out there, and when we ascribe to those unhealthy strategies and theories, we find ourselves creating enemies rather than building advocates and ambassadors for our children, which is ultimately what we're going to need, because everyone needs a community. And then the fourth rule that we teach parents and try to live by is the one that's going to really guide what I'm talking about today. And that is that parents know best. Okay. There is no one on this planet who knows your child better than you do, but they don't know everything. Okay. If Haley has some complex medical issues, and what that means is she has a neurosurgeon, she has a neurologist, she has a spine specialist, she has a bunch of specialists. She had a reading specialist when she was in school, and somebody to teach her math. And I'm hoping that all of those people know more about those pieces of Haley's life than I do. And I need to be able to hear them and take what they're saying into what our picture for Haley's life is. And so the fact that parents know best, but they don't know everything, should produce 2 things for us. The first one is courage, so that no matter how many diplomas are hanging on the wall for a meeting with Haley, I have something to offer. And those people on the other side of the table, if we can call it that, need to hear it, because that helps to shape their ability to serve her. On the other side, coming to terms with the idea that we don't know everything should produce humility. And humility allows us to listen to things even when we don't like what we're hearing, because we need to hear those different perspectives. So with those things in mind, we want to talk about picturing. You guys can't see this, but I talk with my hands. And so, and I feed off of interaction with my group. And so not being able to see you and talking with my, it's a very interesting process here, but we'll do the best we can. So one of the things around working with the idea of life after the yellow bus is starting to see the future and starting to look ahead to a future. And one of the biggest challenges to that is getting stuck in survival mode. And what does that look like? Well, it's just managing to get to the end of the day. And I'm going to be honest with you. There have been days and seasons of our life where getting to the end of the day was a monumental task. And because of that, there were seasons where we didn't make a ton of progress about when it came to Haley's potential. And that's what was required of us at the time. But if we stay there, then we wake up in the same place every day. And while there's a great part of survival because you're surviving, the downside of that is that it's a very inefficient way to live. It requires more energy, it requires more time, and because of that, we lose our space, our ability, our opportunity to really think about what we want for our kids going into the future. And the problem with getting stuck in survival mode, quite frankly, is that adulthood's coming, whether we're ready for it or not. And so being able to push out of that, and if you work with families, your ability to encourage to push them out of that survival mode into a place where we can start to dream and imagine a different life for our kids, even a different season of life for our kids. So this is really important. If you're following along, you're seeing this, the title is Realistic Opportunities. And I'll tell you that for years, I called this the dream. And I loved that because I wanted to point parents toward dreaming for your children. But we were getting regular feedback, and I fought against it for a long time, that using the term dreams was allowing parents to stay stuck in denial about the reality of who their children are and what their limitations might be. And so trying to come up with something that was inspirational and motivational while maybe not being so dreamy, we came up with realistic opportunities. There's realism, and yet it's an opportunity. And so the opportunity indicates that we're going to have to work toward it. We're going to have to build skills. We're going to have to gather people around us to help get Haley to where she wants to be. And I think it's important for us to realize that these are opportunities. They're not entitlements. No one in adulthood has to do these things for us. And so understanding that becomes really, really important. And so are we good advocates? Are we healthy advocates? Are we good ambassadors for Haley? Are we creating a community that wants to help her reach her potential? Or are we creating enemies? The other part of realism that I think is really important is that the truth is Haley cannot do anything. She can't. She has gifts and talents, but she has limits just like the rest of us do. I'm a licensed counselor by profession. I could not be an accountant or an engineer or many other things because I don't have the skill set to do those things. And so I don't need to be offended when someone points out a limitation that Haley has, because we all have them. And we need to be okay with that. Our job is not to make something of her that she wasn't created to be. Our job is to create an environment for her that allows her to be the person that she was created to be. So I want you to start thinking in these terms. And I should have said this when we started, but if I'd love for all of you who are listening to have a blank sheet of paper in front of you. And we're going to use that here in just a minute. But what do you see your students, your children doing as adults? Okay, what are their gifts? What are their skills? And then on the other side of that, what are their challenges? Where do they struggle? Because all of those things are going to come into place when we're trying to figure out what their best possible life looks like. So with that being said, we're going to talk about team building for a few minutes. And this is a question I ask in every group, no matter where I'm teaching, what I'm talking about when it comes to families. And the question is this: if there were no services, what would you do? And people's minds start running away with themselves when we get to that. But there are a whole lot of things that we might not do. But one thing I know we wouldn't do, or at least I hope you wouldn't do, is that if there were no services, I hope you wouldn't go into a corner and just shrivel up and wait to die. You know, I would like to think that most of us would try to figure out ways to accomplish what we need to accomplish, and to get Haley the things that she would need to thrive. And if there were no services, the way we would do that would be to look to our community, right? We would do everything we can do, and then we would look to our community for people who may have different sets of experience and expertise and skills to teach Haley the things that we thought she needed to know that we're not able to. And so I want us to think in those terms, that we are not so dependent on services, but we look to services to fill gaps that we cannot fill. And so the question becomes, what are we doing to build our team, this bigger team? And I'll tell you that I think there are two really common obstacles to team building. And the first one is the emotion of anger. I watch parents all the time who are mad about their situation. They're mad about their child's condition. They're looking for someone to blame or kind of take it out on. And the way I see that a lot of times is this phrase: everything would be fine if. And it's always followed by someone else not doing their job or needing to do their job better. Another one is shame, and that is that anger kind of turned inward, that my daughter would be doing great if I was just a better parent. Well, if that's true, we work on that, but chances are it's not true for you. You're doing what you know to do, and when you learn something different, you do different. And so anger and shame are not really helpful in accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish. The next one is overprotection. How fearful do we live for our kiddos' safety? And I'm not in denial. I realize there are bad people in the world, and I realize that people with special needs are more vulnerable and more picked out of the crowd to be picked on or taken advantage of. So I'm fully aware of that. But at the same time, I will tell you that our life experience has taught us with Haley that there are far, far more good people in the world than there are bad. And that those good people, if we will allow them to be a part of Haley's community, will love her and look out for her even when we're not around. And I think that's really important for us to remember, because it's us building her team and community that makes her far safer than us just making sure we're protecting her all the time. So that's where your community comes in big time. And the question would be then, how big is your community? So if we go forward, my question for you is, who's on your team? Okay, so and how do you know who or what you need for your team? Okay, so we're going to go down to the next one. This is where realistic opportunity really comes in. If you don't have a picture for what your child's life is going to look like in adulthood, how do you know who you need on your team? Okay. And how do you know what services you need? And how do you know what services you can do without? As we sit in the beginning stages of this COVID-19 virus crisis, we see this going on across the country. It's not necessarily related to special needs. We just see it in a lot of places. People hoarding things, right? Have you gone to the grocery store and seen the empty shelves and all that? And it's people hoarding things that they don't need, but they're so afraid of not having something that they hoard it and make it to where others who might need it can't get it. Well, I see this a lot in ARD meetings or IEP meetings. I heard that we have some people that are not from Texas, so you have IEP meetings, but and it bothers me when I hear parents being told by advocates, and this is not Penn Project advocates, by the way, just so you know, that they're being told to take everything you can get. Well, why? Why take services that you don't need or your child doesn't need? And if you don't know if they need it, well, ask the question, how do I see it helping them reach their potential, their opportunity? And if I don't need a particular service, then why don't I free the school up to use that with someone else who does need it to reach their opportunity? Because we know that all of these services have limited opportunities and limited resources. So what if we allowed someone else to use it? And then my question would be, how do you think your meetings would go with school if you only asked for what you really needed? And I wonder if that would change the way school looked at some of us, because they know, they can tell by the question or the comments that we've done our homework, right? So just one point of clarification. This is not my team. It's HALI's team. And that is a very important distinction. I think when we're parents, it's really easy for us to get our identity from our kids. And it's really easy, I think, when we have kids with special needs to get enmeshed into what they're doing. And we get our identity from what they do or don't do, and how we care for them. And when that happens, it's easy for all of these things to become about me. I watch really carefully about language. When I hear parents telling me that they have a doctor's appointment when really HALI does, or when we have surgery, but it's really HALI. It's sometimes that's just figure of speech, but sometimes it reflects just how lost we are in them and not having our own identity. And when that happens, then it becomes about my relationship with you, when really my relationship with you is not nearly as important as your sharing our vision for HALI. Okay. I don't need the people on HALI's team to like me, although I hope they do. I need them to share our vision for her future. And as she gets older, share her vision for her future. And if they do that and have something to offer, they can be on her team. Can we all be okay with that? Or do we need them to like us? So that sheet of paper that I asked you to get, you'll notice that on my slide, there are two small smiley faces. Those represent HALI. If you draw a small smiley face on the left-hand side of your page and put your child's name, and that's where they are today. And then that other smiley face, if you put it on the far right side of the page, and that's where you see them in adulthood. Let's just say where they are at 25. Okay. Now I'll tell you, I've taught this a lot of times in person. I've never done it in a webinar. So who knows if you're doing this, but I hope you will. And then I want you to put a big circle in the middle. And as you'll see on the slide, that's Haley's team. And then if you would just start drawing lines out from that circle and start listing the people that are on your child's team. So obviously Brad and Karen Thompson are on Haley's team. Haley's brother Justin and his wife Monica are on Haley's team. Her bosses at the Turn Center, where she works 2 days a week, and at the Montessori school 2 days a week, they're on her team. All of our doctors are, all of her doctors, I just violated one of my rules, right? All of her doctors are on her team. Now, there are some people that were once on her team that aren't any longer. The biggest motivating factor in our life was her first special education teacher. Well, she's not really on Haley's team anymore because Haley left elementary school a long time ago. And while we still are very grateful for Ms. Mack, she's really not a part of Haley's team anymore. And so she has friends, she has people at church, she has the West Texas A&M volleyball team that are all part of her team. So I'm hoping that as I'm describing that, you're looking at your child's circle and you're drawing lines for that team and writing people's names down. And then the next question is, who's missing or what's missing that would help you get to who you want your child to be in adulthood. As we're talking about the transition years, and you're thinking about what they might do in terms of employment, do you have a vocational coach? Are you signed up for job experience programs? Are you involved in independent living? In your independent living centers programs? If the answer is no, then those are people who may be missing from your team that in order to help Haley move to that vision that you have for her for adulthood, that we need to start connecting with. And so I will give you just a second to be thinking in those terms. And in case you're wondering, your team cannot be too big if everyone on it shares the vision for Haley's adulthood. Okay, so now who's missing? It depends, right? It depends on one thing. Where are you going? Okay, where does she want to be? What does she want to do? And that's why having that picture, that vision of realistic opportunities for her adulthood is so important. Because if we don't know where we're headed, how do we even know what to ask for? How do we know who we need help from? How do we know the resources that we need to tap into? And so going all the way back to where I started, having a picture of her in adulthood, what her best possible life might look like, is so important to driving this process. And then the last question I would ask when it comes to drawing this circle is, does anyone on your team ever disagree with you? And if the answer to that is no, my question would be, why not? One thing that we know about human behavior is that we tend to migrate toward people who think like us. And we like that because then people encourage our positions, and they support us, and they love us, and they encourage us. But if we all think alike, how do we ever introduce something different or new or better into HALI's team? And if we're afraid of being challenged, what does that do to our ability to learn? And so what the research in team building and community reflects is that without dissenting voices, our circle tends to stay the same. Well, if my circle is the same for HALI at 30 as it was for HALI at 20, who's going to suffer? Well, HALI is, because life has changed dramatically for her in the last 10 years. And so if our team's not changing and we're not inviting experts, quote unquote, from the outside who may or may not agree with us, how is our knowledge base ever going to grow? And the thing that I would leave you with in that is this: people can share your vision for your child and disagree with your strategy for getting there. Okay. The truth is, our vision can be big and it can be solid, and there can be a million strategies for getting there. And so what if someone has a different idea? Doesn't mean yours is wrong and theirs is right, or vice versa. It just, the question is, can my ego, can my pride handle someone sharing with me possibly a better way of doing things? And if the answer is no, then we're kind of stuck with what we always have. But if the answer is yes, then we have the opportunity for growth, and we have the opportunity for increased opportunity because of that. And so my last thought is, I believe this wholeheartedly, and you'll never talk me out of it. Every human being has purpose. So if you knew HALI, you would know that while she functions academically at about a third grade level, socially, she is very good, and she is verbal, she's mobile, she's all these things. And I've had people tell me it's really easy for you to dream for a kid like HALI, but what about a kid who is far more limited? And here's the story I tell. So at the Turn Center, I get to work with an occupational therapist who did some work at the University of Kansas, and she shared with me this story about a young man who was nonverbal, who was in a wheelchair, and the only muscle he could move his head, and he had a job in a facility where they needed a door opened and closed and to keep the facility germ-free. I'm losing the word, but and so when people came to go in and out of the door, he used his head to hit the switch that opened the door so that no one had to touch it. And you and I might think that is just a horrible way to live. But that young man loved going to work, and he went to work every day and loved his job because it was him doing what he could do. And so the question is not whether or not our kids can do things that are big to us. It's, are we creating an environment that will allow them to fulfill their purpose? And if the answer is yes, then I will tell you that we have been incredibly faithful as parents, and that faithfulness is all that is ever required of us. So thank you for your time. And if there are questions, I'm happy to take them and do the best I can with them.
Give me a second, Miss
Stephanie. All right. Got
All
it.
right. All right. Thank you, Brad. We do have some questions. I received one in an email, so I'm going to start with that, and then we'll get to the Q&A box. So we had a question from somebody. They asked you to discuss what you are doing in your community to foster cooperation and collaboration with businesses to increase employment of youth and adults with disabilities.
That's a great question. So a year ago this month, we started convening business owners, family members, educators, and therapists to talk about how we could generate more opportunities for work for people with disabilities, and not just jobs and placements, but meaningful work. And so over the past year, we have been able to convene groups of as many as 80 people with about 30 to 40 employers to start talking with them about the jobs that they have available for people with disabilities, and then working backward to talk about how we, with school and occupational therapists and vocational coaches, build opportunities for kids, young adults to learn these skills so that they become valuable employees for these people who are looking to hire them. And so we're calling it Monday's Connections. And the reason we call it Monday Connection is because Monday represents the day after the great experience. Well, we don't want just great experiences for our kids. We want meaningful life. And that means in adulthood, Monday is about going to a job that they love going to and fulfill a meaningful purpose. So that's what we're doing in Amarillo/Canyon, Texas. We believe it's something that can be done anywhere. But the big part on our end is we have to have parents who are not in denial, who are not angry, who will come to the table and say, what would it take? And then we have to work on the other side to say, employers, you have a very valuable employment resource here that will be committed and dedicated and will stay with you as long as anyone else will, and longer, according to the employment statistics. You just need to tell us what it takes to do that job. So that's what we're doing. And then backing way up, we're encouraging families of young children to dream appropriate dreams, reasonable expectations.
Excellent. I just want to remind everyone to put your questions in the Q&A box, if you will, so we can make sure to get all of your questions. So I'm going to start with those questions. So they asked who all is on HALI's team. You kind of talked about that. And their follow-up question was, how did you identify and build that team?
Great question. So we start by looking at the people who are naturally on her team, family. I could have put grandparents on her team. All of her grandparents lived fairly close to her and loved her and would help us, whether it was in childcare or other things. You start to realize from your own community the people that are your friends that are good with HALI, and look out for her and play with her and don't see her disabilities. They just see HALI. And so you just continue to add those people to your team as you see those connections. And then in those spaces that, we ask the question, who's missing? Then we start asking people and start being really intentional about trying to connect to people who would fill that niche. We had to go talk to the volleyball coach in the 7th grade about HALI being a part of the team. We had to do that again when she went to our college program at West Texas A&M and ask the coach what it would take to be a part of her team. And we just continue and continue. And now as a 30-year-old, she's inviting people to her team. And so, and then we have to screen them a little bit, of course. So does that Does that answer that question?
That was excellent. Thank you for that. So our next question, somebody asked for you to repeat those 4 points that you gave at the beginning of your presentation.
Oh goodness. Okay, so the first one is parents know best, but they don't know everything. The second is parents need to educate themselves to be healthy advocates. The third is we must nurture a sense of humor. And then the fourth is we must take care of ourselves.
Excellent. All right. So the next question, do public schools offer an evaluation or assessment tool to students in special education to help identify their strengths and skills?
Not that I'm aware of. We have some skills test evaluations that can be done. I don't know if they've ever been tested for validity for people with developmental disabilities. I'm just not sure. I think the best way to do that for our kiddos with special needs is in conversation and then giving experience an opportunity that allows them to try different things and see what they love to do. Haley loves small children, and so finding spaces where she can be with them and invest in them and love on them was key, and to her having her best life possible.
Excellent. All right, another good question. At what age should transition services and identifying skills start?
Well, the school system starts at age 14, right? I want to say that while that formal process around age 14 is great, that's fine. We as parents should be identifying the things that they're good at from a much earlier age than that. And seeing the things that they love to do, right? And as we're seeing the things that they love to do, we start looking for opportunities for them to do them. Haley was in junior high when she started volunteering in the church nursery, and that allowed us to see not only did she truly love kids, but she also was pretty good with them. And so that helped us to narrow our focus, right? So if we're looking, but we won't see those things if we're stuck in survival mode.
Excellent. All right, so the next question, this person says they've attended some transition fairs, and a common comment that they hear is that SPED students can get a job but cannot keep the job due to social or work-related skills.
Huh.
Any suggestions?
Yes, I have some, and that is a common thing. My wife Karen has a Wednesday night church group that has about 100 adults with special needs in the group, and those guys are far more likely to lose their job because of poor social skills than they are because of competency issues on the job. And that comes back to us as parents. Are we excusing bad behavior because of their disability, or are we demanding that they learn good skills? Because and I get, it's all on a spectrum here, but the truth is that when we're little and cute, the world has a lot of grace for us and a lot of patience. But as we get older and less cute, the adult world, quite frankly, just doesn't care that much about our disability. They want to know, can we do the job, and can we be nice to their customers and to their coworkers? And if the answer to that is yes, you can keep your job. Well, let's start teaching those skills early and continuing to build that. And with that big picture in mind, stop letting them get away with things that they know better. And I get, and this is the hardest parenting line to walk, if you ask me, what is Haley's disability, and what is her ability to manipulate adults? I want to have grace for the disability, and I want to discipline the manipulation. And don't tell me that a kid with disabilities doesn't know how to manipulate adults, because you're living in denial if that's the case. But figuring out what's what can be really, really challenging. I get that. Experienced it.
Excellent. All right, the next question, how do you help your child understand where their limitations are, as well as how they can succeed despite those limits?
So first, let's be honest about them. Okay, let's just be honest about them. And you don't have limitations because you have a disability. We all have limitations. Your disability may just accentuate those things. And so we're just honest about that. It's, my dad looked at me when I was in college and I was quote unquote majoring in engineering. And he said, Brad, you can't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't do that? I'm all offended that my dad doesn't think I can do something. He said, that's not what you were cut out to be. You don't have the skills for it. You're not good at math. You're a lot of things, but that's not what you were cut out to be. So first of all, let's be honest with them about their limitations. And then let's start talking to them about all of the things that are possible for them. And chances are really good if we start focusing them on their strengths, they will find the things that they really love to do. And it's in that capacity that we find those jobs that they will do and they will love. And chances are they will stay in because they love them. The kiddos who get fired from their jobs are kids that are in jobs that they may not have wanted to begin with.
Absolutely. All right. Next question. We've got some great questions. How do you address parents that don't have reasonable dreams or expectations for their child?
That's the worst, depending on how old their kids are. I'll tell you a quick story, and I know we ran out of time quickly, but I had a parent that I was kind of guinea pigging our program with, and her son's 16 years old, and he has a significant handicap on one side of his body. Great kid, sharp as a tack, but he wants to be a fireman. Well, he can't meet the physical requirements, but no one, including mom or dad, has ever said anything that no, you can't. They just kind of kept pushing the ball down the road, hoping someone else would be the bad guy. Well, we have to deal with the realities of who our kids are, and then we just have to speak into that and say, there are a lot of things we can't do. There are some things we can, and let's focus on those things. Did I even answer that question?
Absolutely.
Okay, just making sure. Sometimes I get on rants and stuff.
All right, here's a good question. So you talked earlier about your Connections Monday that you started in the Amarillo and Canyon community. So the question is, how would other people in other communities go about starting that? So how did you get started on your Connections Monday?
So we just started looking within our circles of influence. And quite honestly, we were able to do this because of the circle of, the circle of influence that Turn Center has in our community. And because of that, they had many business connections who said, yeah, we'd be interested in at least hearing about this. And then we used a bunch of our occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech therapists. We also reached out into our special education community and our vocational education community. And then we very carefully selected a handful of parents who would be great representatives of parents who are very involved in their kids' lives and would be willing to inform the employment community conversation without making it about them. Does that make sense? Whoever asked that question, I'm happy to have a conversation with you going forward, maybe in more detailed outline as to how we went about doing that.
Absolutely. So several more questions still. So are there some resources that professionals can provide to parents and families for work, continued learning, things after the yellow bus?
Yes. We should be able to look to organizations like our independent living centers, our disabilities councils, the PEN Project, who I think has a pretty robust transition information section. I think all of those places, our school districts, especially our secondary education folks, they should have vocational programs that would support us in at least figuring things out. But don't sell short your ability as parents to know what your child likes to do and know people, whether it's through church or school or other civic organizations that might have employment opportunities, even if it's just an employment experience, to help our kids find their niche in the community.
Absolutely. All right. So this person says, my experience has been having someone within the team that doesn't have the same faith or confidence in my child's ability or goals as I do. While it's good to have those that don't agree with us, we can't afford to have someone impede our child's progress. So what are your suggestions in that situation?
So first of all, do they share the vision? If they don't share the vision, then maybe they shouldn't be on our team. But before I just quote unquote kick them off the team, I want to sit down and have an honest conversation with them about, and the question is, tell me what you see or don't see in my child. Okay, because what if they see some things, like if Dr. Medford, Haley's primary care doctor, comes to me or in a meeting says, Brad, I don't think that's good for Haley. I don't think you should be doing that. I know that it is not because Dr. Medford doesn't share our vision for Haley. It's because she sees her from a very different perspective and knows some things about her health that I don't know. And because of that, she has some concerns that might limit what I think Haley should do or whatever. So I want to make sure that when people, when I get the sense that somebody is trying to limit Haley's future and potential, I want to make sure that I have the ability to have an honest conversation with them to really take what their perspective is into account before I just dismiss them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So kind of a little along those same lines, when we're talking about disagreement and what's realistic, who determines what is realistic for the child? I think both the school and the parents have to do some introspection and look at how to truly collaborate on this. There is a lot of talk about angry parents and bad advocates, and I'm not sure that these effectively build a team collaboration. So who determines what is realistic?
Well, I think parents do, if they have truly come to terms with who their child is holistically, strengths, weaknesses, all of the above. Because while we have a team, and it's not my team, it's Haley's team, I believe parents, when their kids are in school age, they're the coaches of that team. And so we get to kind of set the course. But do we have anybody checking us as parents to make sure that we're not living in denial about what Haley's limitations are, what her strengths are, et cetera? Do we have anybody who will set us down and tell us the truth, even when we're not going to like it? And those are really, really hard conversations to have, but we need to have them if we're going to build that best possible team to get Haley to her best possible life.
Absolutely.
And
So
I would
kind of
say,
to, go ahead.
Stephanie, those are pretty challenging questions generically to answer, and I'm happy to have more conversation with people if they want to.
Absolutely. So we're going to kind of shift a little bit our questions. So we've got some questions. One says, do you have any advice for families that are seeking services when those families are undocumented?
Wow, that's a little outside my scope. But what I would say is that in those cases, your community becomes even more important. And I get that if we're undocumented, the chances are we are suspicious of gathering informal gatherings, especially government-related gatherings, which school is one of them. And so that can make building your team really difficult. I would say finding an advocate like a Stephanie McLaughlin would be really helpful. Not passing the buck, but we can still do things in team building and community regardless of our citizenship status, and it may be even more important to have that healthy team in that setting. And I can see that a big challenge would be is that an undocumented parent who doesn't love their child any less probably has very little social capital, which is so important in building a team. And so how do we as community support them, those who don't have a lot of social capital? I think it's a great challenge of our generation when it comes to serving everyone, especially in the state of Texas.
Absolutely. So along similar lines, how do you think that your experience can relate to the experience of others from different cultural backgrounds?
I think it fits perfectly because every culture knows how its culture works, right? And every culture has a sense or a form of community that that they tap into. And I think we as people who are trying to help from outside a particular culture just need to recognize that while we might use some similar strategies or themes, the strategies will look very different from one culture to the next. And we need to be humble enough to allow those things to happen within their culture and speak into them as outsiders, but in ways that might be supportive of them.
Absolutely. All right. All right, good question. So how can you get your child who wants to be like everybody else to embrace and utilize the resources that they require to be successful?
First is we have to help them be okay with who they are. And I mentioned Ms. Mack earlier in my talk. And one of the things I loved about her is she started very early with her students, telling them that they are different and that they do struggle in some things that maybe their brothers and sisters or their other classmates don't struggle in. And it's okay. It just means that's not what you were created to do. And so the sooner we're able to get our kids to be okay with who they are, then the sooner they will start to embrace the things they can do. And obviously that starts first with us as parents. Are we okay with who our kids are? And you know, that goes across whether you have a disability or not. Are we okay when our kids don't look like we thought they would look? and if not, can we get okay? Because we will never be effective advocates until we're okay with who they are. And it's really, really difficult to get them to be okay if we're not.
Absolutely. We're at 1:15 and we want to be mindful of everybody's time. We do have a few more questions, but we're going to go ahead and stop the recording and want to share with you some upcoming events with Partners Resource Network, and then we can come back to any questions that are left at that time. All right, so we do have an upcoming webinar on Tuesday, April the 14th, also at 12:15. This one is on transition planning, paving the way for your child's future success. We're going to have a guest speaker, Nina Zunia from the Texas Center for Disability Studies at the University of Texas at Austin. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be a great transition webinar for you.
We also have, sorry Stephanie to jump in here, but just because it's not on the slide yet, we're working with Disability Rights Texas and Stephen Alamont on a webinar about your child's education rights during this coronavirus pandemic. But we don't have a date and time confirmed. As soon as we do, we'll post it on our website and on our Facebook page. I don't know why I keep calling it Facebook Live. All right.
Because we have Facebook Live coming up. So we have an upcoming Facebook Live series that is starting this week. Actually, tomorrow will be our first one. It's going to be parent tips for at-home learning. So tomorrow, we're going to have tips for setting routines and managing behaviors. On Thursday, we're going to have mental health and behavioral concerns that families may be dealing with in the face of school closures. And we've got a few more topics that those times and dates haven't been set yet, but we're working on getting those done. So you can see that full list of upcoming Facebook Lives on our Facebook page at PRN Texas and look at the events tab. These are going to be some short, brief Facebook Lives that are going to give you some great tips on how to navigate these uncertain waters that we're in right now. So we invite you and welcome you to join us for those Facebook Lives beginning tomorrow at 1 o'clock. All right. Here is our contact information. If you have any questions or want to contact us, again, my name is Stephanie McLaughlin. I'm the Training and Evaluation Specialist, and my email is there. And then our Director of Statewide Services is Christina Henning. You can also join us on Facebook, and you can go to our website at at prntexas.org, and you can look at the statewide webinars or peruse our website. We have so much great information on that website. So we invite you to take a look at our website and learn more about us. So thank you for being here.